Hi, I'm Neha Dewan.
Hi, I'm Sonjui Kumar. We are South Asians for Harris, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
My name is Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with talented and interesting individuals linked to the global Indian and South Asian community. It's informal and informative, adding insights to our evolving cultural expressions, where each person can proudly say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." With the election upon us here in the US, these next few weeks on Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing, we're sharing a series of Lotus for POTUS conversations, hearing insights from leading edge voices to help inform and get out the vote. A few months ago, I created a meme with a photo of Vice President Harris that went, "In Sanskrit, Kamala means lotus. In America, Kamala means POTUS." And for me and many others, that sentiment sums up the imperative choice we're making at the highest level, being thoughtful about our past, present, and future. Now, a big part of amplifying our voice for more representation in 2024 comes from engaging, educating, and mobilizing the South Asian American community to show up and frankly be heard through our vote. And especially with our growing significance in the past several elections, South Asians for Harris has been accelerating, strategizing, coalition building, and supporting voters as a national grassroots and volunteer organization dedicated to securing a victory for Kamala Harris. So it was terrific to share a conversation together with Neha Dewan, Co-National Director for South Asians for Harris, and Sonjui Kumar, National Legal Director for South Asians for Harris. Neha is an attorney with a wealth of experiences who has long been active in politics and advocacy for the South Asian community at both the local and national level. And Sonjui is also an attorney, a former president of the South Asian Bar Association of North America, and a key leader and organizer in the Georgia South Asian community. They both, along with many other leaders, have been tirelessly working to build and grow the effort to help voters register, combat disinformation, get resources out there in many languages, and strengthen collaboration among other voter blocs. Whether canvassing or rallying or phone banking or cultivating relationships, the movement has been gaining support and momentum, and still, of course, has much work to do. I caught up recently with Neha and Sonjui as we hit the home stretch here, and about the work that's in front of all of us. But I also wanted to quickly reflect on the exciting and transformative whirlwind that the Harris campaign has already been. And so I asked them both, when reflecting on the past few months and thinking of what's ahead, what words came to mind to describe it all. Here's Neha first.
I think I would say two. So it's hectic and exhilarating, right? At the same time. So
Yeah. Sonjui, how about you?
Just happy and whirlwind, like just one thing after the next, which is good. And by the way, it's for us in Georgia, it's October 15th. So we're like, that's when it all counts. And we're actually telling everybody to vote on day 1, 2, 3 so that we get like an onslaught of voting,
Yeah.
use intimidation tactics.
Well, happy and hectic and exhilarating and all those words and adjectives that go into all of this, and especially with voting underway and about to get going in so many different states. You both have had such a front row seat to all of this, right? To working and organizing and building community and coalitions to mobilize so much. And so specifically now with Kamala Harris and this sort of historic candidacy, are you both sensing any different energy, particularly, and or sort of maybe even a resonance as it relates back to all of our communities? And Sanjay, maybe I'd love to hear from you first, particularly from the vantage point you just mentioned, which is in such an important state like Georgia.
So definitely from the young people. So the youth they're back in. We were having a hard time engaging them, both in this state and just even nationally, the work that, we do with South Asians for Harris. And then they were knocking our doors, after July 21. And so that energy has been palpable and new. And then I would say even just amongst the rest of the population, just not having the same old race again, like we have been doing this, seems like forever. So just a new race. And she's, of course we know her and love her because she's part of us and we've known her so long. I love when people get to hear her for the first time. Like Neha and I got to sit next to each other at the DNC,
Mm.
and coming home and having people say, she's really smart and she really knows what she's talking about. I'm like, yeah, we try not to be condescending, but it's like,
Right.
we've known all that.
Yeah.
Welcome to the family.
But and Neha, it's important to remind people of that, right? So like, I mean, when you think about the energy that's different, or whether it's young people or old people, is there something that resonates a little bit differently right now? Even though, you know her so well, and perhaps both of you have had this, but Neha, for you, how does this resonate maybe a little bit differently?
So for me personally, I mean, it's interesting. So Sonjui had given me this painting of Kamala that I brought home, and I showed that to my 2-year-old, and I said, who does she look like? And she said, "Mommy." And I was like,
Yeah.
well, she's a 2-year-old. What does she know? And then I showed her a picture of somebody who's white, and I said, who does she look like? And she was just kind of like quiet, right? So I was like, okay, well, she's kind of knows what she's talking about. When I went to my 5-year-old, and I said, who does she look like? And she's like, that's mommy. That's your picture. So for me, that just says a lot, because I've been in this space for a decade and a half, and to be here today is great. And I think people are really sensing that, this sense of belonging, also a fresh perspective, glass ceiling. I mean, there's just so many different things that connect to so many different people.
And my daughters are about 20 years older than Neha. I have 30-year-olds who were completely disengaged with this election, and they are progressive, active people. Like they are, I mean, one is a public, is like a criminal justice lawyer. The other one is in the climate space. I mean, these are not quiet women, and they were just totally disengaged. And then I got to watch them just jump in, with a different energy.
Whether they're 2 or 5-year-olds who maybe can't vote, but can certainly, get a lot of incredible representation, and it resonates for them on a more heart-based level. And then, your daughters, Sonjui, who are in a space where they're actually doing a lot of important work, but perhaps had the apathy piece that was there. I'm curious for both of you now, because there's a big voter block that we don't always, look at, and that's for seniors in our community. How do you think the energy has perhaps, changed, or has the calculus or message changed at all that you think, especially from what you're hearing from people?
So I maybe am closer to the senior community than Neha is.
I didn't want to mention any of that, but sure.
Sonjui's a lot of fun, by the way, Abe. If you ever meet her in person, she's a ton of fun. But go ahead, Sonjui.
Good.
I also have an 85-year-old mother who I take care of. Lives across the street, who moved from New Jersey, like a very, non-conservative state, to Georgia. And my mom is engaged. Like her friends are engaged. She's wearing her Harris Walls pin in her senior living. And I think even our friends who are like in their late 60s and 70s, I think things like democracy and voting rights and reproductive rights and gun violence, I think they span generations. I think if you're of a certain mindset, if you're of a progressive liberal bent, like that makes sense to you. But even if you are conservative, those types of issues, they're barrier breaking. We've had several of our, so the South Asian men, like they vote taxes, right? We all know that. They vote for their own wallet, even though they are the last people that need to vote for their wallet, but they do. And those people, anecdotally, are telling me they are not voting Trump this time. So I'm taking a lot of, heart in that, because these are quiet people. These are not people that are telling everybody. Of course, they tell me because they know they're on the outs with me, so they want to get back in. So they're letting me know. But it's heartening. I think it's a change. Definitely
That's
a change.
Great. Neha, what about you as far as resonance and energy with different age groups?
Yeah, I think if you're looking at that cohort that you just mentioned, there's a sense of belonging, right? So like you have the first generation who, have come here sort of with their head down and kind of done their work and, just moved along, just never had identity. And now you're actually seeing some level of identity. And it's just not just identity, it's also policies. And there's also this level of decency, right? It's like, how do we, regardless of whether it's our wallet or not, it's like, how do you have, first of all, how is it even this close between a convicted felon and a prosecutor? But I think those things also play into it, right? So there's a lot of different aspects to this. But I think they're also really excited. And I think that the part that's really heartening is that this relational organization piece, right? So they will say, okay, I'm going to bring 5 people. You bring 5 people. You bring 5 people. And that's this voter bloc that you can really count on to do that. But
Yeah.
they're very energized in a different way.
No, and I love that, right? I mean, there's so much that binds us in our community, and it's a good reminder that these are American issues. They're not specifically for identity, and they really just do link us all together, no matter what sort of political spin we've had in the past. Neha, I'm curious for you particularly, one issue we're always facing, and you just mentioned it with like sort of they tell five people and they tell five people, is how we combat disinformation. So, when it comes to this, are there tools and tips that you have so that people can kind of educate and empower and really help themselves to dampen and counter misinformation, which unfortunately in our WhatsApp communities just seems to spread like wildfire sometimes?
Yeah, so one of the things that we specifically had done in 2020, which we're replicating now, is having this rapid response team. And we
Yeah.
are looking at the issues that the campaign wants to put out. In fact, we're the unofficial official sort of arm of the campaign, so we get that feedback from them. We have a rapid response team that creates graphics,
Mm.
and we drop that in the channels that we had back in 2020 that we had established, right? These are not new channels, so this is WhatsApp, Facebook, whatever it is. We also then have a rapid response team that is taking a look at Project 2025, so it's not just a matter of what her policies are, but what is being put out there, and how do we combat that and put that information. But the sad reality is that for the majority of Americans, they're just going to see these snippets,
Yeah.
Fox News or whatever it is that they're putting out. So part of this is going to be the work that they have to do in terms of research, but it's a community, right? So if you get something and says, oh, actually it's not 46.4% unrealized capital gains tax, here, actually take a look at this, and you forward that and forward that, that's what we're hoping to do.
Yeah. And on that same beat, right? There's being able to provide a rapid response, and then there's also being able to educate on policy. And Sonjui, I am so curious. I mean, it's an issue everywhere, but particularly in swing states, voters are focusing on the economy and they're focusing on immigration. And these are policy platforms that have been outlined by the Harris-Walz campaign. What are some of the ways that platform speaks specifically maybe to South Asian Americans that you're talking to, that really they should be reminded of? Not necessarily the misinformation, but the information that's out there.
Yeah, so on the economy, there's so much to say. And, again, we're doing it more on a relational organizing basis, like the one on one conversations, but just being ourselves informed enough, to talk about the Inflation Reduction that has happened and the Infrastructure Act and, all these things that Biden Harris team did that actually Trump said he was going to do. And
Mm.
people do get confused. They
Yeah.
think that Trump started it. It's like, no, he just talked about it a lot. He actually never did anything about it.
Yeah.
This is something that Biden Harris did. Immigration is an interesting issue because, especially like in the Indian American community, they're just all complaining about everyone who's waiting and that there's a backlog.
Right.
So I think the communication on those types of issues for us has been, we just need adults in charge of the government. Like these are historical problems that, could have continued. More people from India and China want to get into this country than we have visas for. But who do you trust to like manage backlogs? Who do you trust to have like processes that work? And I think that works in a lot of areas where people are dissatisfied. It's like, yeah, we get it. The world is horrible and it's chaotic, but who do you want in charge when the world is horrible and chaotic? You want adults who believe in government and believe in the power of government. And so I think that's how we address it. And people really, I feel like, don't want to hear details as much as they want to be assured. Definitely, when Kamala Harris was first announced, there was a lot of like kind of fear that she's not strong enough, she doesn't have enough experience. And when you tell them, well, she's actually had more experience than any of the four people on the ticket. Like she is the most out of all four.
And I was going to say, Sonjui, you mentioned an important word there. I mean, we've been referring to this, but that's the word trust, right? I mean, so I'm curious for both of you, like in a nutshell, what leads you to share with the people you meet about why it's important and why should they actually place their trust in the Harris-Walz ticket and in a Harris-Walz administration?
I mean, you're talking about a candidate that's promoting the values, American values, right? You're talking about reproductive rights, family reunification, all of these different things. We're not talking about sending immigrants back and shutting down the Department of Education and all of these things. I mean, you're actually talking about somebody who wants to promote America and
Yeah.
work on policies and kind of unite the country, right? So there's that trust factor, there's that resonance there. And on the other side, I mean, I was just listening to NPR today where Trump was talking about how Harris didn't work at McDonald's and how he actually, his 30 minutes doing cooking fries is more than Harris's. And I'm like, is that what you want to be listening to? Is that the kind of president you want?
Yeah.
Challenging our McDonald's versus the actual policies where she's putting out those policies. She's talking about what it is that she can do for you. It's a no-brainer.
The adult in the room is really obvious here, for
I
sure.
mean, I'm gonna say so. Neha and I are both lawyers. Kamala Harris is a lawyer. Of course, she's like super lawyer, being a prosecutor
Superstar.
and AG. But
Yeah.
we're kind of we're trained to tell the truth, and we're
Yeah.
trained like our licenses are in danger when we lie, and we like part. The reason we're like made fun of for parsing our words is because we're trying to say them accurately.
Mm.
And kill all the lawyers was a compliment, get rid of the people that know what the laws are. So I think I have trust in it. And of course, we've heard from a whole, troop of bad lawyers that Trump hired, during
Yeah.
the election. But by and large, the legal community is a community that, you can trust. And she's certainly shown that in all the years. She has been out there like, where are the scandals? Where's the
Yeah.
mess? Like she's
Yeah.
been in the public eye a long time.
Yeah, it's amazing again, like how much of a contrast it is. And yet, like you mentioned, right, people sometimes are not always interested in the details here. And, especially in our South Asian American communities and sort of like the coalitions we build with the Asian community at large, we're not monoliths. We do have quite a bit of diversity in our thought processes and our languages. And so how have you both been able to sort of embrace that diversity of language and interest and even differences in political opinions to help unify around the obvious choice, the adult in the room, the contrast in style and how trustworthy a campaign is? How have you both been able to just sort of like help people think around that unifying message, irrespective of what those kind of differences and diversities are?
Yeah, so one of the things that we did in 2020 that we've sort of been very cognizant of this time is, that the South Asian community is very diverse, right?
Yeah.
We can't just put them into one box and say the issues are the same. But what we've done is very carefully sort of respected those communities and listened to what matters for those communities and then frame our message in such a way that really speaks to that community as well. We've also done translation services, not just in Indian languages, talking about Urdu and Pashto. Like, who
Yeah.
would have thought, right? So we're being very surgical about talking to different communities and offering them guidance in terms of the campaign. But also at the same time, we do have a sense of we are united in a certain way. We do have a common identity, right? So
Yeah.
we can be different, but we can also be the same. So when you're speaking to different people in the phone bank and speaking in different languages, that's powerful. You're just not expecting that every South Asian person is Indian by
Right.
design. It just sometimes ends up being by default. But we're very, very methodical about who we bring into the community and how it is that we do our grassroots work.
Yeah, I mean, Georgia is a great example. We have the largest API caucus outside of Hawaii. We actually don't have one Indian American in that API
Right.
caucus. They're
Right.
Bangladeshi, they're Pakistani, we have Korean Americans, Chinese Americans. And I think what unifies us and what brings us together is to highlight our differences and actually gives us a broader reach because we're reaching into all these communities. India's kind of the big elephant in the room, but there's lots of communities that can have influence, and that honestly, if you win a state by 11,000 votes, just even like a very small
It's a
community
big deal. Yeah.
can make a difference. And so I think what we do very well at South Asians for Harris is make every community feel important, seen and heard, and give them their proper place in the diaspora. And the reason we work so well with AAPI communities, they're the same. Like Chinese and Koreans and Taiwanese, like they have nothing other, culturally they're not that connected,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
in the US they are, because
Yeah.
we're together and we're the 4% in, some states, and 11% in other states that are going to make a difference.
I know it's so important to be both surgically precise in a way and yet be so inclusive and make sure that there's a lot of empathy in listening to people's stories. I know we only have a moment or two left, but for those people who are just getting to learn about Kamala Harris for the first time, they're just getting in and getting involved, and again, kind of rediscovering themselves in the political process after perhaps some apathy. What's your quick message to folks who are newly getting into this?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, it's great. Get involved, but make sure it's not just you, right? Like, it's bring other people. People say, well, blue states don't matter. No, absolutely not. People know folks in battleground states. Bring other people to this and make sure that they vote. It's not just register to vote, it's that they're actually voting. And it's great. It's like soak up this energy and see what civic engagement is, and follow through with it and see. It's a movement. And not
Yeah.
just a movement now, but be engaged in the future. So this is great. This is just the beginning for these folks.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, if you had any doubts about Kamala Harris, see what she's been able to do in 2 months. Who else anywhere? Forget parties. Like, who else can pull this together when she didn't even know till Sunday afternoon that she was going to be the candidate? By the time of the DNC, have this outpouring and enthusiasm in that room. I mean, that is a sign of her competence and a sign of her team's competence and what we can expect in a Harris-Walz government. Just even the pick of Tim Walz is so, in my mind, brilliant. Like, I never even knew the guy's name till he was, and here we are. We're like so engaged.
Right.
I'd never heard of him, some of our, of course, some of our colleagues had, because Minnesota, but we hadn't. And, now he's like everybody's best friend. So, I mean, competence in all the decisions is like really, we would have been with her, but it would have been harder if things were not going as well as they are.
And if I could just add to that, one thing is, I've heard from a lot of people is like, oh my goodness, she's so great or whatever. But the races are still very, very tight in these battleground states. What does that say about her? That actually says a lot about her. She's been only around for 60 days. Trump was there for 4 years, and he's been around since the primaries, and it's a tight race. So
we
that
were
says something about her.
-9 in Georgia 2 months ago, and now it's neck and neck. So
I think you're so right. It's amazing, right? It's astonishing that it's been 2 months, and yes, it's tight, but there's a lot of momentum building and a lot of both gravitas of being the adults in the room, but also the joy of what's to come. Neha, Sonjui, thank you so much for joining us for a treat of a conversation, and thanks for all you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thanks for all you're doing.
thank you.
Thanks so much. Remember, conversation is truly the antidote to apathy. Now, this is all in the show notes, but I'll share it here too. Go to iwillvote.com for information about resources, to SouthAsiansForHarris2024.org, and to KamalaHarris.com to learn about the Harris-Walz campaign. Please get involved, get engaged, and get informed about all your local issues and candidates up and down the ballot. Till next time, I'm Abhay Dandekar.